Hello, Whovians, subscribers, and random YouTubers just stumbling over this video. Wow, this has to be like the best episode of Doctor Who ever. Like, I really didn't think Steven Moffat could write something so amazing. Like, this episode was so awesome, I seriously don't see myself ever going back to watch any of the original series episodes again because it was just that good. How can you sit and watch this episode and not just be in awe of how awesome Steven Moffat is with his writing? Everything made sense. I mean, Santa Claus being in there. I mean, it was just, everything in this episode was perfect. Especially the green tinting. And especially Santa Claus riding Rudolph like a horse. It's just, everything about this episode was perfect. It was just so... Hello, Whovians, subscribers, and random YouTubers just stumbling over this video. This episode is perhaps not the worst Christmas special, but Moffat still fails to deliver a strong story. As many people have already said, this episode borrowed heavily from the stories of Alien and Inception. Honestly, about the only things I found to be done right were the practical use of effects and Moffat managing to explain Santa Claus being in an episode of Doctor Who without relying on a complete dismissal of science fiction. I did notice early on that this episode was more or less going to be a base under siege format, kind of like Cold War or Horror of Fang Rock, and even though I spotted it for what it was, it didn't really bother me. I mean, it's a good formula for Doctor Who stories, and it usually works really well. Some of the elements were done really well, like the face crab still being able to see you even if you shut your eyes. This all relies on telepathy, and while it doesn't exist in humans, it's not some fantasy-laden explanation. Nevertheless, this just seemed to be another one of Moffat's hallmark aliens. Don't blink, don't forget, don't breathe, don't think, don't turn around. It's just Moffat taking ordinary things that we take for granted in our daily lives and turning it into something potentially dangerous. I mean, It worked at first, but it's kind of become a repetitive theme that's lost its punch. At the risk of sounding like I just can't be pleased, I do have a few complaints with this episode, and they're mainly due to Moffat's writing. Again. First off, let me say that I felt the story overall to be fairly weak and predictable. I'm not sure if Moffat intended it that way, but before Clara even had her dream where she was living with Danny Pink, I had already worked out that the entire base, including Santa and his reindeer, was probably some sort of shared dream or hallucination between the crew. In fact, this is kind of obvious considering that one moment it's raining face crabs on everyone with no foreseeable method of escape, and the next moment Santa Claus comes barging in with an army of useless toys and a couple of wisecracking elves. Suddenly, all the face crabs have disappeared. Add to that the fact that both the Doctor and Clara have already encountered Santa Claus on Clara's rooftop. Before I get into the main things I found wrong with this episode, I want to quickly go over some of the minor things that bothered me that probably didn't bother most people watching. Number 1, color grading. Yes, I know, I'm complaining about this again. Holy shit, am I the only one that noticed how over-tinted everything was with green? Now, you might could argue that they were trying to copy what the Matrix films did by having any action taking place in the virtual environment tinted green, while anything taking place in the real world be natural color. Initially, this makes sense, except that wasn't the whole idea behind this episode to make it impossible for viewers to distinguish between the real world and the dream world? Anyway, it's not something that most people complain about, but personally, I didn't see the point. It just looks like a lazy attempt to make the show appear more dark and gritty, but it ends up looking like some cheap summer sci-fi flick. Number 2, theft deterrent systems. Okay, despite it being a completely useless reference to pop culture, the 10th Doctor locking his TARDIS with a remote key, complete with blip blip sounds and the end of time, was kind of amusing because the Ood actually reacted the same way that most of us were reacting. Kind of like... Anyway. But that's just something that could only be done once. Vastra locking her carriage like that in deep breath and then Santa locking Rudolph like this is just stupid. It's not funny and it's not clever. It's just fucking stupid. Don't do that anymore. Ever. With anything. Number 3, Santa Claus. Despite me being wholly opposed to this character being in an episode of Doctor Who, I was overall okay with it by the end, since Moffat ultimately admits that Santa and anything surrounding his story is indeed just a fairy tale. The problem is that it really didn't need to be Santa Claus. It was basically just Santa Claus because this episode was a Christmas special. You could have replaced Santa Claus with any fictional character and the story still would have worked exactly the way it did. That's really all I can say on this one. It's not something I see myself jumping to watch again. One final thing I'd like to discuss. As I said, the general theme behind the story was that we can never distinguish between dreams and reality. Unless you're a lucid dreamer, Moffat. Moffat has stated that he's already worked out what the big game-changing cliffhanger for Series 9 is going to be. And I kind of think I already know where he's going with this. Missy is also slated to return next season, so I'm predicting that all of the events of Series 8 and Series 9 will end up being some shared hallucination or dream between the Doctor and Clara. Maybe it's a post-regeneration problem, or it could be the face crabs, or they could actually be in the nethersphere, or it could be something completely new. Don't forget that Moffat also touched on the we can't tell the difference between dreams and reality bit in the opening of Dark Water. So this episode just seems to be him elaborating on his arc that will span these 2 seasons. In either case, this does seem to be the direction that Moffat is going with next season, and considering how predictable he is, I'm going to be expecting this at the end of Series 9. I guess we'll see. I hope you liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel, because my next Doctor Who video will more than likely be my 20 predictions for Series 9. Expect it around the middle of January. I may try to squeeze in another video on another topic between now and then. Be seeing you!